You're listening to the Dad Whisperer podcast with Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield, the place where you, as a dad, will gain more tools for your fathering toolbox, and where moms and daughters are also invited to listen into the conversation. Now, here is your host, Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield.
Hello and welcome back to the Dad Whisperer podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield. I welcome you here today, whether you're a new listener, a repeat listener, whether you're a dad, whether you're a daughter, wherever you're at in life, this is a place where I trust that the things we talk about here are equipping you as dads to dial into your daughter's hearts. And if you're like a lot of women I hear from, this is also helpful sometimes to help you unpack your relationship with your dad. So all of you are standing on the sidelines, right? Running your race this week, whether you're a dad, whether you're a daughter, you're doing the best you can to keep up with all the things in your life. And I want you to just picture me on the sidelines as your coach saying, on your mark, get set, go. On your mark is the topic or the theme. Get set. I'm going to fill that in with stories and stats. And go is always your practical action step so that you can put the things that we talk about that specific week into action. I'm all about practical, creative, applicable things that you really can use in your daily life and put into practice. And so today I'm sharing something deep in me, on my heart to your heart, from my mind to your mind, from my mouth to your ears. And here is on your mark today. It's simply called Healing Father Wounds, a process of forgiveness. So now for Get Set, what I want to say here at the start is that I realize some of you dads will be listening and saying, this is about my relationship with my dad. And I always remember one year in the ABBA project that, it's 9 months long, once a month, meet with about 12, 13 men a year, 9 months at a time, September to May. I told them it's like language school. You're learning how to speak Venusian. You're from Mars. You speak Martian. This is about learning how to speak your daughter's language. And I would say to them, every month builds on the last one about learning about her heart, learning about her needs, learning about her personality and love languages and all those things. And in order, to enhance and strengthen and support that relationship. And then month 7 out of 9, I hit the topic of father wounds. And I say to the dads every year, is this may feel like a bait and switch. Like you may have thought you were here to learn about your daughter and how you relate to her. And now I'm flipping the script and I'm having you look at your own relationship with your dad that's impacting how you father your daughter. And I quoted one guy year after year because this helped me. I'm going to be honest with you. I felt like if another dad was talking to these men, it would support what I was saying more than what I was saying. And here's what Tom said one year. He said, if we're not willing and able to look at our own wounds with our dad, how can we ever expect to connect with the heart of our daughter and be open to where we've wounded her? Isn't that powerful? So John Mayer said, how can I love a woman who has already been hurt by her dad, has daddy issues, and so I can't love a woman that can't love me back because she's stuck in places of woundedness with her dad? Pretty powerful, right? He said that was a backstory to him writing this song because he was trying to find a woman to marry. In fact, I think he's still not married, right? Because he's saying, I can't find a woman who doesn't have daddy issues or dad wounds. So you may be a daughter listening today that says, I need some help. I need some support to better unpack and understand my history with my dad. So I welcome all of you today. Again, the title, Healing Father Wounds, a Process of Forgiveness. I'm going to also tell you one more thing here at the onset of this conversation that motivated me to bring this to light today. And that's that last month, my husband and I spoke at a conference. It's called the American Association of Christian Counselors Conference. 7,000, counselors, social workers, psychologists, lay counselors, pastors, leaders convene every other year for this world conference in Nashville to better equip, I would say, speaking of myself, ourselves. I mean, I think I've been to 10 of them, at least 8. I can't even remember the first year I went. It's been so many years. And I've spoken many years at it. I've attended workshops. And here's what I want you to know. They asked Ken and I to speak on father wounds a year ago. They said, this is the topic we want you to address, which tells me something about where they feel there's a felt need in our culture. Again, this isn't saying that these things don't also apply to mother wounds or that we don't have mother wounds. Of course we do. This isn't just railing on men and on fathers. But I also am curious about what has this topic coming up over and over again as being significant. I'm going to tell you a couple more things that have happened this year. Then, a few months ago at our church, there was a young adult group and they said, hey, can you and Ken come speak? I gave them a list of topics I could speak on. The one they picked, mother and father wounds. Then a couple months ago, earlier in the summer, I did a webinar for a group of women out of Hollywood and that are in the film industry. Here's the topics I can talk about. Yep, father wounds, that's the one we want. The leader of it, Kathleen Cook, said, I see so many women that compromise in the industry or that get lost in their identity, and you can trace it back to a father wound. So here's what I'm saying to all of you listening. I'm right there with you. We're all affected by father wounds. So it's not if we will be wounded by our mother or father, it's when. Because we're all fallen creatures. We all do the best we can. We may have a good heart, but my goodness, we all have it, don't we? We all have our reactions. We all have our stuff that despite our best efforts, these things get passed on to the next generation. And so whether you're in the driver's seat, so to speak, where your kids are in the passenger or back seat and you're affecting them, or whether you're still, maybe unmarried or at a place in your life where you are in relationship with your dad at any age and you're still being wounded by him, this is for you. And really my goal today in a short amount of time is to really begin to address this topic, not get to all of it, of course. But again, y'all know that I do coaching and counseling across the country. I'm so grateful for being on this side of COVID where we all learned how to do telehealth in my field. So I do a lot of that and I'm available if you want to reach out. Just go to my website, drmichellewatson.com, and I'd be happy to join you in unpacking more so that you can heal and move forward. Let me just say one other thing here at the start, and then I'm going to do some definitions, and then we're going to get to some practical action steps if you're ready to engage in a process of unpacking your father wounds. And that is just to say that, we've all heard people say things that mean well, but they make it worse, right? And so perhaps you've been on the receiving end of maybe insensitive comments about abuse, abandonment, neglect, whether it's religious abuse, spiritual abuse, father wounds, father voids, spiritual leaders in your home. And you've heard things like, you just need to forgive and forget. You just need to turn the other cheek. The ground is level at the foot of the cross. And that whole idea of forgetting what lies behind, just reach forward to what lies ahead. People misquote that out of the book of Philippians because at the beginning of that chapter, Paul actually just addressed all the things he had done in the past. He wasn't saying forget them as if they weren't part of his history. He was saying don't find your identity there. And really that's the thing, is any wounds that we have in our physical bodies affect the whole body, don't they? You bummed up your knee in college, it still smarts now or maybe is worse now because you're older. And that injury, that wound still affects you today because it's part of your history. It's the same with father wounds. Those things in the past that activate in the present are real and legitimate, and we can't just pray them away or wish them away or hope them away. Like with any physical injury, we have to do something about it. In fact, this week I've been 7 times to my chiropractor because I went running on the hills of California and something tweaked my knee and my ankle. So I kept thinking I could deal with it on my own, but then I had to go to a professional who had a skill set I didn't have, who helped me and is helping me heal. And I'm amazed at what happens when someone with that skill set can join and partner with me, which is really my privilege to partner with those that allow me to walk with them. through whatever maze or journey or trenches or deep places they invite me to go into with them. And that's part of the healing journey. Okay. What I want to do now is define 3 kinds of impacts that we have from our fathers. So 1, father wounds. Father wounds. So let me define that. These are specific things that a dad does do that hurt his child, right? Daughter or son. Physical wounding, it can be verbal, it can be sexual, it can be spiritual or emotional. So any of those kinds of wounds are what affect us. Now, I had a mentor for 20 years who told me he refers to these things as A and B traumas. He says the B traumas are the bad things. So it starts with that letter. So that's how he would categorize a wound from a dad. It is a bad thing. You can name it. You know when it happened. You can give voice to it. You know how it felt. You know where you were. You may have known what you were wearing. And you can tell the details because you can name it. You can speak to it. I think of my best friend's dad, Jim. He told me this story years ago about how when he was 16 years old, he says, I didn't really even have any relationship with my dad, but my dad was very militant, had a lot of high expectations. And he said, I remember once in the garage where my dad would usually go. I didn't have a lot of connection with my dad. He would hide out in his garage. And he said, he would invent things and, that was kind of his man cave, I guess you could say. So he said, one day I was asked by my dad to clean my garage floor, the garage floor, I should say, not his dad's. And he said, I swept it as best I could, only to have my dad later say, you can't even sweep the floor right. Look at that. You can't even sweep the floor right. He said years later, when he became president of his company, he'd worked all the way up from, lower level all the way to president. He was hoping his dad would be excited. And he said, all my dad said was, that's great. Now, we could say, hey, at least his dad said something. But for such a huge accomplishment, his dad didn't know how to use his words to validate his son. And guess what Jim said to me? It was the floor sweeping episode all over again. He said, even though my dad has been dead for over 20 years, I still hear his voice in my head. It's like he's still looking over my shoulder. So that may be something that you can bear witness to, that the messages that you've received from the wounds of your dad, right? Because we give out what we have that have been delivered to you. I call them the blows. Those are the bad things that you can name. They tend to repeat. They're on repeat in our brain, and they tend to get activated. So you've heard me say this before. I'll say it again. On a 0 to 10 scale, if you hit an 8, 9, or 10 of reactivity, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, are the ways our nervous systems respond, and we have a big emotional reaction. It seems like it's maybe your daughter or your son or those shoes that are left one more time in the hallway after you've asked 10 times. But like you just heard Jim say, his current way, I know this for a fact, that he's mowed his lawn, perfect lines. He's still trying to please his dead father because he can hear his voice in his head. And so that's still a big reaction, I would call it. He's still living bound by his dad's perfection or his dad's lack of affirmation. So that 8, 9, or 10 reaction is always old stuff. That's our own stuff, even though it seems like it's what's happening in the present. So if you've never written out wounds from your dad, I would encourage you to begin to make a list. And I'm going to talk about that at the end a little more. Here's the other thing I want to say is embedded in every wound is a lie. Let me say that again. Embedded in every wound is a lie. This is, again, what I learned from my mentor, the one that taught me about A and B trauma, Jim Friesen. He taught me so much about this of we have to listen for the lies. I've also done some training more remotely with Ed Smith with Theophostic Ministry. And the way he would say it is that we have lies we believe and we need the light. You could either say of God's truth to come and turn the light on, or if you're not someone that ascribes to, evangelical or biblical beliefs, that's okay. You may just say, I just love light. I love light. I love truth to come to lies. That tends to be a universal theme that I have found all of my clients over 30 years have been able to resonate with and bear witness to wherever you're at on that spectrum of understanding faith. So here's the truth. We either live from our hurt or we live from our heart. So because you hear how often I talk about father wounds and healing, or I should say, I don't always say father wounds, but I talk about father relationships, right? And ways to avoid wounds. I've, over the last years, addressed so many aspects, even though I don't say that they're wounds. They're things that obviously are about, challenges, let's say it that way, in relationships, right? Between dads and daughters, because I want dads to avoid wounding their daughters and increase connection, increase heart engagement. So again, if that isn't happening, your daughter will be living from her hurt, and so will you. Another quote I want to say is that breaking the lies are part of healing the wound. So the more you can identify and name the wounds, the more you're able to break the lies attached to the wound. So think about the fact that, where Jim's still beating himself up, I can't even mow my lawn right, or I can't even get praised from my dad. So then he's extra hard on himself. He's repeating the injury from his dad to him. And it's like, in a way, he takes up the baton and beats himself with it, even though his dad isn't here to do it anymore because of the years of reinforcement. And then he's believing a lie that he's not enough. He's not doing it perfect enough. He's not doing things right enough. It's something bad on his part. So that's where the healing needs to come. And we'll get to that a little bit later. I also find it interesting. Let me say one more thing here before we go to break about wounds. And that is that I find it really interesting that John 8:44, red letter, means Jesus said these words. He called Satan the father of what? Lies. Not the father of darkness or the father of evil or the father of sin. He calls him the father of what? Lies. I say he has a PhD in liology. So those lies, you think, if that's what the enemy loves to hook into us, to really bait us, right, to be stuck, he's got us, right? But Jesus called him a father of lies. He's a counterfeit father. So Dad, this is why your lack of awareness, let's say it that way, of the impact of woundedness and words that wound, responses that wound, maybe you're unaware of how much that impacts, right, your kids, because maybe you walk out of the room in the huff, or you go to the garage like Jim's dad did and don't see the impact of what you've just delivered as a blow to your kids or to your wife in front of them, or whatever that is, or on the phone to someone. But that's being encoded and imprints the hearts of your kids in ways that stay with them forever. And that is obviously not what you want to be doing. And that's why I'm addressing this here today. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll keep talking about how you can heal from father wounds. We'll be right back.
Are you a dad who has ever desired a deeper connection with your daughter, but haven't known how to go about it? Let's Talk Conversation Starters for Dads and Daughters is the very resource you need. Dr. Michelle wrote it with you dads in mind. This book will support you with scripted questions, equip you to decode your daughter, and inspire you with stories of other dads and daughters. Don't wait any longer to be the hero you want to be and that your daughter needs you to be. So, to let the talking begin, head on over to drmichellewatson.com/books and order your copy today. This book will become a favorite in your fathering toolbox and will give you the answers you've been looking for. That's drmichellewatson.com/books. Now, back to the Dad Whisperer podcast.
Welcome back. Okay, I'm Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield, the Dad Whisperer, and today on your mark is Healing Father Wounds, a process of forgiveness. Okay, just talked about father wounds being one way that dads impact their kids. Number two, father voids, right? So it's the empty places. It's what dad does not do to connect with his child. So this could be broken promises. This could be unkept commitments. You said you'd do it and you didn't. And again, this isn't about perfection. This is more talking about a pattern Everybody misses things here and again, but we're talking about the patterns. It's a lack of time, making time. It's not investing financially or emotionally. It's not investing spiritually. It's not investing mentally, like connecting that way, mind to mind. Let's, talk this out and think about this and plan and strategize together. It also could be lack of not investing relationally, right? So that is what, going back to my mentor, I said A and B trauma. My mentor calls this the A trauma. It's the absence of the good things. The third way a dad impacts his child, you'll love this one. This is the positive one. It's father gifts. Father gifts. So these are things that a dad does specifically do to positively invest in his child. And it has to do with your words and your actions so that they line up. Ways that you let your son or your daughter know that he or she is valuable, worthy, special, treasured, loved, adored, respected. You want that respect. You want to give it. And what I would say is there's a really big movement, especially over the last few years, about attachment wounds, attachment issues, and that you can trace this as well. So teaching you that term, secure attachment, the other side is insecure attachment, right? That's the anxious attachment, the disorganized attachment, ambivalent attachment, kind of a distant. These are the different kinds of insecure attachments, right, that come from the A and B trauma. But the secure attachment comes from the deposits that you make. Dan Siegel and Tina Bain Bryson have an awesome book called The Power of Showing Up: How Parental Presence Shapes Who Our Kids Become and How Their Brains Get Wired. So again, if you want to read more about that, they're a book I would recommend because they're talking about how you show up for your kids. Lets them know they're safe and seen and soothed and secure. So I know I'm fire hosing you here with a lot of information. You can listen back to this if you want, because I would recommend these books and learning more about how you can engage with your son and your daughter's hearts. So yes, today I'm broadening this to sons as well, because we know that the father wounds and forgiveness and this process that I want to talk about what do you do with the wounds, applies to all of us, doesn't it? Okay, let me now segue to the process of forgiveness. So I've just addressed the wounds, the voids, and the gifts that dads can give. So here's something that I really believe you're going to love. And it is a model that I call it heal. How do you heal from wounds that we have from our fathers or mothers, of course? Because I love acrostics, here's my HEAL model. And I was telling you at the top of the show how I've been asked a lot this year to speak on this topic. I mean, I have over the years written in magazines and journals and blogs, guest blogging, and I've been asked a lot about the topic of father wounds over the last 15 years. But especially this year, it comes up over and over, because even in June, I was on different radio programs or podcasts, and that's what I would be asked a lot. And what was really fun is Dr. Tim Clinton, president of AACC, who had me on his show, loved this HEAL model and posted it. And this was the clip they put out there. So it tells me that this resonates. And so I'm going to tell you all four, HEAL, and then I'll come back and break them down just a little bit more so that they make more sense. So H, honestly face the hurt. That's the H, the first part, step one. Honestly face the hurt. E, express the pain. Express the pain. A, allow another to walk with you. Allow another person to walk with you. And L, let go. Let go, which is another way of saying forgive. Okay, now I'm going to go back now that you have the HEAL model so that you know where we're going here. Okay, honestly face the hurt is step one. So back where I told you earlier that sometimes we've heard phrases from people, well-meaning is, hey, you're going through this so you can help other people, kind of in a way downplaying the impact of the wound. And usually that's not very helpful when you're the one hurting, because it shuts it off. It shuts it down. It kind of shuts it off. in terms of communication and expression, which kind of segues into that second one. But honestly face the hurt. You can do this yourself, even if no one around you wants you to be honest about it and maybe wants you to just let bygones be bygones, forgive and forget. But honestly facing the hurt means you give the stories inside you a voice. You're honest about them. You communicate about them. Maybe you've heard this phrase before, what you don't feel can't heal. I really believe that. You've got to express and feel what's inside. Like I said, that kind of goes to the second one, but honestly facing the hurt means you're being honest about it. You're turning toward it. You face it. You're not minimizing. You're not maximizing. You're not denying. You're not excusing, and you're not over spiritualizing. You're being super duper honest. Okay. That's the H. Segues into E, as you heard me just say a few times, express the pain. What I mean by that is this is kind of gross, but think of it as popping a zit. If you've got something painful and it's got some infection in it, you've got to express it. You've got to release it and get it out. So this step is about verbally and emotionally releasing what's held inside. Now, if you're like some men and women I've known, that sounds easier said than done, because this is not easy work. Because once you're tapping into the wounds or the voids, you aren't going to be as productive for a while, meaning you don't just do this cognitively. That's why I'm saying here, you have to feel this to deal with this and to heal from this, right? So this means that when you're feeling this and tapping into this, it's going to slow you down a little bit, right? Or a lot of it, depending on how big the injury is and severe, intense, duration, how long it went. But here's some ways that you can express the pain. You can cry it out. You can journal it out. You can talk it out. You can walk it out. You can do exercise, get it out that way. You can pray it out. And you can hit a pillow. I even had a friend once, a guy I knew in my 20s, who got a punching bag and would punch it out. So the point here, though, is there's not one way, and I would encourage you to diversify your portfolio here, because one of these isn't going to be enough to do all of it. So there you go. Some practical ways to express the pain. A, allow another to walk with you. So here's the truth, is interpersonal injuries, that's how we're wounded. So the healing is interpersonal relating, right? So I always say we hurt within the context of relationship and we heal within the context of relationship. So it's so hard to trust again. I have clients that are very, very, very tentative to trust again. In fact, literally, I had a conversation with a woman this week about that. She's so afraid to trust again, and yet sometimes the pain is too much that we can't hold it in anymore. In fact, that's how I started counseling. At the age of 28, I called a counselor and said, actually, I think I was 29, and said, it was a breakup with a guy, and I thought that's all it was, but there was so much more underneath it about abuse and trauma. Why would I let this guy who'd said he didn't like 66 things about me, why would I break up and then date him again? Oh, because I loved him, I told myself. I'm saying it now lighthearted, but I'm telling you, it was excruciating to get through that. And yet, again, like I'm saying here today, the current things connect back to our childhood. My mentor used to say he believes it's before the age of 4 or 5. I've had some others in training say they think it's more woundedness before the age of 12. But my point is, either way, it's little child stuff that comes back to smart in the present. And so allowing another to walk with you means that you're taking a risk again to trust someone to know you, to see you, to hear your story. So this is where you may need to hire someone professionally. And I've had a lot of clients that say, I don't want anyone to know my stuff. So that's why I'm hiring a professional where you have ethical responsibilities for confidentiality, because that lets me know I can vent here and it's going to stay here. And then I've had other people, just even friends, say, I know, even ones I've mentored, in a restaurant where people could overhear us, but they're saying, I know that I need someone to bear witness to my story and bear witness to the pain. They can even hold you accountable. So that's another piece of it. It's, my best friend recently, with some things I'm processing through with father wounds, I'm at another layer in my journey of that with my dad and being honest and giving a voice, is that this friend of mine said, Michelle, you may not like what I'm going to say, but here it is. I've prayed over this. I'm speaking the truth in love, but here's where I hear you getting stuck. Here's where I hear you harboring unforgiveness. And that's the segue now to the L, the let go and forgive. Here's the thing about forgiveness. I actually did my doctoral dissertation on this topic of forgiveness. So I spent like a year in the research, learning all there was, that was out there at the time, right? That I could find, doing a deep dive on what does forgiveness mean? What is it? What is it not? And my favorite definition was let go. It's a letting go of harboring resentment or revenge, a desire for revenge. But here's what is key that I've got to bring into this conversation about forgiveness is we have to know as much what forgiveness isn't as much as we need to know what forgiveness is. So forgiveness is not condoning behavior, especially if it's sinful or sexual. It is not verbal, any kind of assault, abuse. No. It's not tolerating inexcusable behavior. It's not negating the need for boundaries. And forgiveness is not forgetting. Absolutely, this is not forgetting. In fact, I had a great uncle. I have a lot of grandfather wounds from my grandfather. You've heard me talk about this before. I have sexual abuse from my mom's dad. And he died when I was 8, but, some quote unquote damage had already been done. And years later, I think this was 2010, I went back to Minnesota, took my mom with me, met with my great uncle. There were only 2 living siblings out of 12 at that point. And I asked him, did you know anything about my grandfather, your brother's sexual abuse of me, others, And he said, well, I know that that's what people have said about him, but he kept telling me repeatedly, you just need to forgive and forget. And I remember saying to him, I'll never forget. I've had lots of healing. It's been lots of time, money, and energy. In fact, I love a verse in Psalms where David said, I was forced to restore what I did not steal. And I love that verse because I'm like, I had to put a lot of money in to counseling for 8 years, a lot of time, money, energy for what I didn't do, but what it was done to me. But I would do it again. I would do it again to be where I am now. And maybe that's a word that some of you needed to hear today. But he kept saying, forgive and forget. So as we walked out, I put my arm in his arm and I thanked him. He was 88 years old at the time and said, thank you for your time. Thank you for talking with me. And he said, can I give you one last piece of advice? You just need to forgive and forget. And by this point, I'm tired of hearing this. I looked at him. I said, do I not seem like I've forgiven? I'll never forget what he said. He immediately said, well, you do seem awfully happy. And that's the last time I ever talked with him. So him saying you do seem awfully happy is a layman's way of saying, I'd done the work. I wasn't holding revenge against my grandfather. I processed it deep dive with a counselor, with God, with Jesus, journaled, cried. I would beat a pillow so that wouldn't express it. One time I was beating a pillow really hard to get out the anger. And I came up with the stick I had in my hand to give myself a black eye. I am serious. Yes, I'm all in. You can tell I'm an all in kind of woman. I was getting it out. I was expressing the pain, And so I'm telling you, I've lived this, and that's why I'm talking about it today. Even though I'm at another layer of my journey, I know this is actually part of the process. So now let's talk about what forgiveness is. It's a process that takes a lot of time. So anyone that says, you need to forgive today, because that's another one. If you don't forgive, God won't forgive you. And there's a pressure of you've got to do it today. You've got to do it now or God won't forgive you. I would never say that to anyone in my world, whether it's professionally or personally, because what I have found is it is a process that takes time and has lots of layers to it. But I encourage people and myself to forgive as you go. Forgive as you go. Do whatever came up, if you can, forgive it today. Forgive as you go. And it's not one big forgiveness event. It's little by little, these droplets of release. So here's also what forgiveness is. It's a choice of the will. It's not a feeling, right? So it's not something you're going to always feel like doing, but it's choosing with your will to let go. It's refusing to let bitterness take root, and it's no longer requiring that the person who hurt you owes you anything. And I know that's a really, really, really hard one. And I love Neil Anderson's work. He says in Steps to Freedom in Christ, he says, people say, well, why should I let them off the hook? If I forgive them, I'm letting them off the hook. He said, actually, you're still hooked to them through unforgiveness. But when you choose to forgive, you're unhooked because you say, God, I can't deal with them fairly. Right? Romans 12:1, you say, vengeance is yours, revenge is yours, you'll repay. I'm going to release this into the hands of someone bigger, stronger, greater than me who can actually, deal with this in a way that I never will. Okay, I know you've already hung in there with me, but I'm going to give you one more template. And I probably need to do another program on this because this is so involved. But I just want to leave this with you. This may even be your action step. So, your go step today has been woven through. Write out your dad wounds. Give them a voice. Write them down. Let someone else. That's the honestly face the hurt. A, allow another to walk with you. Forgot the E. E is express the pain, but it's voicing it, getting it out to another person who can bear witness, be a safe witness to your pain and your story. And then that L, all of that together is the releasing process for healing. So I'm going to give you also one more model if you want to read more about forgiveness. This is one of my favorite books on forgiveness. It's called Forgiving the Unforgivable. Subtitle, Overcoming the Bitter Legacy of Intimate Wounds. Author Beverly Flanagan. It's an older book, but it is as potent and applicable today as it was when she wrote it in the 90s. So her 6-step process of forgiveness. So back to this truth that forgiveness is a process that takes time. It is not a quick process if there's not a quick fix. And the deeper and longer the injury, the deeper and longer the process takes. So first of all, she says, number one, if you want to forgive, is name the injury. So that goes to my H, right? Honestly face the hurt. Name it. Name the injury. Number two, she said, is claiming the injury, which is really looking at the impact of that. So you're not just saying, my grandfather sexually abused me. End of story. I now know it. See, I named it. But that expressing the pain honestly, facing it, means this step, claiming the injury. How has that actually impacted my life? Number three, she says, okay, this one might not sit well with all of you, but she says, blaming the injurer. Someone did this act. Someone holds responsibility. And that's where if you're a faith, adhering person, you believe the Bible and that makes sense to you and resonates with you, and that Romans 12:1 bears witness with your spirit, is you're handing your wound off to a different father. You're giving this to God as a father, because this stuff tends to mess with our view of God as a father, right? We project those wounds onto God and say, you must be the same way. And that's where, perception is projection, right? Like I projected that onto God. But this saying, oh, Jesus on the cross says, by his wounds, we've been healed. He took our wounds on his body on the cross, and he took them to the grave, rose again, and is seated at the right hand of the Father. So they're 3 in 1, right? And we're embedded in that relationship. So someone has to be accountable for that injury. Number 4, reestablishing power. So she says, this is not about gaining more understanding. At some point you say, I'm not going to understand anymore why it happened, but at some point I need to move forward and let this go and gain power over this, mastery over this injury so that it doesn't have power over me. Number 5 is then she says, choosing to forgive. She's saying it takes that many steps to finally know what you're releasing. You're letting go of the person, holding them responsible or accountable because they may never do that. So you don't want to be attached to the wound and the injury forever, waiting for the person who injured you to come and repent, which is a whole Matthew 18 thing. There's a chapter to read about how do you release someone. Really, it's saying, God, I have to hand this off to you because it's too much for me. And then number 6 is emergence of a new self. That's that conversion where hatred is gone, she says, and the intimate injuries are placed into a larger perspective. And I love this sentence. She says, the gift of forgiveness is the relaxation of vigilance. So when we're hurt, we tend to be hypervigilant, like looking for others to hurt us again or that person. Her last sentence that I love, this transformative process propels a person toward a new set of personal beliefs while acknowledging that pain can be endured and transcended because suffering has a greater purpose. So I love her 6-step process: naming the injury, claiming the injury, blaming the injurer, reestablishing power, choosing to forgive, and then there's an emergence of a new self. Okay, we got through it all. I know that was a lot. You may need to re-listen to this. But again, today, On Your Mark has been Healing Father Wounds, a process of forgiveness. I know this was a deep dive and an overview all in one. Again, you can reach out to me at drmichellewatson.com. There, I've got a link where you can, find my books. You can find how to get a hold of me, and we can keep the conversation going. And today, I just want to say, go steps here at the end. Maybe you need to honestly face the hurt. Maybe you need to E, express the pain. Maybe it's time for A, allow another to walk with you. And maybe it's time to let go and forgive your dad for the injuries that he caused. But you can't do that until you've understood more of what it is you're releasing. So I really encourage you today to enter into this conversation. Maybe you'll even play this podcast back with your injurer, send it to them, or you'll, as a dad, listen to this with your daughter and say, tell me how I've wounded you. Tell me the voids you have. Where have I missed meeting you where you needed me to miss you? Or to connect. Blah, blah, blah. Tell me how I've injured you, missed you. Where are there voids where I missed being the dad you needed me to be? So Dad, I encourage you to take hold of these principles. Daughter, I encourage you to put these things into action so that we can strengthen relationships and all of us can heal. Well, I'm Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield, the Dad Whisperer, signing off and wishing you, Dad, today a day where you intentionally and consistently invest in pursuing your daughter's hearts. And daughters, I'm going to say one thing to you here is I also want today to be a day where you intentionally choose to heal from your father wounds so that you can be the woman that God has made you to be. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to the next time we meet again.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Dad Whisperer podcast with Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield. If you're looking for more resources to support the father-daughter relationship, or if you want to connect personally with Dr. Michelle, you can find all the information you need at drmichellewatson.com. That's drmichellewatson.com. And remember, you can listen to the Dad Whisperer podcast anytime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. And while you're there, we'd love for you to subscribe and leave us a review. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again on the next edition of the Dad Whisperer podcast with Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield.